Well, good morning and welcome to the Lockhart Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Felicia Lockhart. And today we're looking at a topic that sort of threw everybody off. I know it threw me off when I read the numbers, but it's 300,000 Black women forced out of the United States workforce. So the first person that we're going to hear from is going to be Katya Roy. Now, Miss Roy is one of those individuals who has her mission set to be an intersectional gender equity gap individual. So that's who she is. But let's talk about why she is going to be the person dealing specifically with this topic. She's going to be the first person that we see. And then after that, I'm going to give you some statistics that I didn't know. And you may be sort of shocked once you hear them as well. Nonetheless, let's go on ahead and look at exactly what it is that we're dealing with before we hear what she needs to say. Between early February and April of 2025, nearly 300,000 Black women exited the workforce, but not by choice, but overwhelmingly due to layoffs and job terminations, particularly from the federal and public sector positions. Those losses were concentrated in fields like, public administration, education, healthcare administration, as well as, don't forget, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI initiatives. The national scale of these terminations was largely the result of widespread DEI rollbacks, federal policy restructuring, and abrupt agency downsizing, with many employees recounting department-wide cuts that occurred without severance or even warning. While the mass job loss was nationwide, it had especially devastating consequences in metro areas with high concentrations of Black women in government jobs, including Detroit, Los Angeles, Atlanta, cities that were sort of peppered across Texas, as well as the DMV, or the DC, Maryland, Virginia region. So let's go on ahead and take a listen to what she has, and then I'm going to come back with a few more statistics that get us up to speed with exactly what's going on.
Well, the job cuts, yeah, it's a good question. So if we take a step back, this is an economic alarm bell. The primary piece that we are seeing is the federal job cuts and the agencies that were actually targeted for those cuts, which such as education and healthcare, which are predominantly employed Black women. So, for instance, if you look at women's labor force participation and the percentage of Black women in the labor force, they make up about 6% of the labor force, but 12% of federal jobs.
Wow. And we've certainly seen that loss, and we felt that loss locally for sure with the federal reduction. What kind of impact? So we talked a little bit about the economic effect. What kind of impact is the loss of Black women in the workforce having locally, nationally? I mean, what does it mean for the future when it comes to things like student loans, home ownership, and building generational wealth?
And that's a great point. So one of the things that we know is for every percentage point of women leaving the labor force, it actually hits GDP at about $164 billion. So in other words, the connection is 1% equals about 146 billion GDP loss. But then we have things such as housing, the spillover effects that you were talking about, housing, healthcare, education, et cetera. And we've seen that even with inflation, right? So Black women on average earn 64 cents on the dollar, but the inflation rate as of last week is 3 times that for women's goods and services.
Let me ask you, while all of this news seems very, very bleak, is there an upside? How do we go about reversing this trend?
Well, one of the things that we assume is that policy is gender neutral. It's not. It's gender ignorant. And what I mean by that is when we make these cuts, we're assuming that it's gender neutral. It isn't. It's gender ignorant. And the issue is that it impacts everyone. It doesn't only impact Black women, it impacts the entire economy. Just as one example, between 1970 and 2016, women increasing their labor force participation added $2 trillion to the US economy. When we see Black women leaving the labor force, we're actually shrinking our economy.
Wow. And as you wrote, that affects every single one of us. So when we talk about that big number again, 300,000 women, Black women leaving the workforce in just a couple of months, what sort of trends did you see? Are they out of the workforce? Are they becoming entrepreneurs? Where are these 300,000 women going? What are they doing now?
That's a great question. We don't really know. What we can look at from historical data is that there are two things that are probably happening. One is that they are becoming entrepreneurs, so small business owners. That's one piece. Or they're joining the informal economy. So they may not be participating in the formal economy, which is tracked by things like the monthly jobs report, but they're participating in the informal economy.
Let me just ask a last question here for the many women who are watching right now who are in this space. What would you tell them? What would your advice to them be?
Tell your story. I would say stand up and speak out. If we need, the stories that I have heard just from publishing this article 5 days ago are incredible, and we need to hear your voices, and we need you. This is not just an issue of equity or fairness. Mm-hmm. This is actually an issue of economic opportunity for everyone.
All right. Gender economist Katya Roy, thank you so much for joining us.
So now the question is exactly how much will that voice help, especially right now when this is devastating? And because it's devastating, it's actually affected a lot of other sectors, exactly as Ms. Roy just said. Some of the sectors that it's affected is, let's look at housing. How has it affected housing? Well, there are in Detroit, a 2025 report that was revealed that over 50% of Black women in 3 counties had either been affected by an eviction, or they were going through the courts or subjected to illegal evictions, which is something that a lot of people don't discuss. So despite being overrepresented in low income or single parent status in official records, they remain disproportionately targeted in housing courts. In Los Angeles, for example, housing department complaints of wrongful evictions surged over 11,000 in 2023, while the police documented more than 1,000 calls related to illegal lockouts. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, they logged over 2,000 similar calls across a 3-year span. In Houston, other parts of Texas, they also had eviction filings there that not only returned to pre-pandemic levels, but surpassed them in volume by 2024. So across these regions, Black women were consistently overrepresented among eviction defendants, making up 28.4% of all the filings of those with children, despite accounting for a much smaller share of the total renter population. So that not only affects the family, and these numbers, mind you, start from 2023 all the way to present. So imagine what it is now that we have seen this large amount of individuals who are no longer able to have these positions. One of the things that it's important to note is that even though these numbers were for 2023, 2024, that now that these women are being looked at for jobs or lack of, they are now in competition with each other for the exact same jobs that may be available now. So that means you're going to have these folks out of jobs even longer. Now, of course, I'm going to give my commentary at the end of this to tell you exactly what I think this is all about. But for right now, let's look at some of the situations that people had when they owned a home. For owning a home, it's pretty much the same thing. But the bad part is when you're out of there, you're out of there. Well, let's get on to this portion, because there's a lot of women out there right now that had auto loans. Some of the auto loans are delinquent now. They've risen sharply in these same regions that I just mentioned. Let's take, for example, by Q1 of 2025, more than 6.6 of subprime auto loans across the United States were 60 days past due. They were over that. And more than 8% of the borrowers were behind on their payments. For example, in Georgia, the delinquency rate hovered at around 7.8%, while Texas stood at 6.1%, with monthly car payments averaging, oh my gosh, listen to this number, averaging a nation-leading $867. My God, That is a lot of money to push a vehicle that you probably won't own for several years. Nonetheless, though data broken down by race and gender is sort of limited, we do know that Black women are widely acknowledged to be overrepresented in subprime lending due to historic credit disparities and other reasons, possibly because some of us don't know how to go in and negotiate and talk about those numbers, or maybe they've had credit challenges. On average, they're going to pay 0.6% more than men. Again, because men are not going to sit here and let you tell them, hey, you're going to pay this amount in your interest. They're going to haggle a little. They're going to, they're going to sit there and do a little bit of bargaining, and that's what you should do. So they have 0.6% more than men and 2.6% more than white borrowers in interest, driving up their monthly payments and increasing the likelihood of a repossession. The simultaneous risk of eviction and vehicle repossession reflects a compounding crisis. Now, if we look in the DMV area, and the reason why I really wanted to take a look at this area specifically was because this is where a lot of those job cuts took effect, right? So in the DMV region, it adds a crucial piece to this national picture. As a hub for the federal government, many of the Black women living in the DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia area were among the first and hardest hit by public sector layoffs. In past years, they had a strong presence in federal agencies and administrative support roles. With the DEI offices defunded and entire programs shuttered, many in this region have faced both economic and eviction filings, though comprehensive data is still emerging. Now, anecdotally and through places like Reddit forums, former federal workers in the DC area have described facing layoffs with no severance and a rapid spiral into rent arrears. Regarding the marriage status, and that's one of the really important things, the marital status is something that I want to talk about as well. While there are really no official federal data for me to give you guys right now, it does not consistently isolate, even though I don't have that data, the marital status by both race and eviction. So it's nothing that I have that's, sectioned off. But what I do want to tell you is that there are some available reports that suggest a significant portion of the impacted women, particularly those with children, are unmarried or single heads of household. Black women with children face an annual eviction rate of 28.4% compared to 16.3% for those without children, highlighting that single mothers are at the greatest risk. Though often working full-time, their positions are more likely to be contract-based, lower paying, as well as tied to vulnerable government programs. Taken together, these losses have not only stripped hundreds of thousands of Black women of financial stability, but have also destabilized their ability to maintain housing and transportation, two foundational pillars of economic mobility. The trend lines from 2021 to 2025 show a dangerous intersection. Systemic job loss, rising auto delinquencies, and escalating eviction rates that are most severe for Black women in major cities, especially those supporting children alone. These women they are not simply facing isolated economic challenges. They're weathering a multi-front storm. And when we look at the multi-front storm, we're looking at all of the businesses that, not only the three that we've mentioned, meaning housing, cars, I think those are the main two, just the housing and the cars, but there are other mitigating things that hinge on them having those jobs. We're looking at, let's break it down. We're looking at individuals that had to have upkeep, right? They had to get their nails done. They had to buy food and groceries. They had to get their hair done. Each one of the sectors that I've just mentioned, albeit they may be small, they have people who run those businesses. The hairdresser has a family, or the barber, because a lot of women like me wear their hair short. A lot of people do. They have to get their hair done. Well, now that customer is not showing up. That affects the bottom line of a small business owner somewhere. The grocer, that affects their business because that person's not purchasing as much. They're purchasing, but not as much, even though they may have children, right? So you've got all of these other sectors that are really being affected by these 300,000 women who are no longer working. Another major component that I want to add here is how confident a lot of these women, unfortunately, were during the election time. I have to say it because if we don't talk about this, then we will overlook it altogether. Over the past several years, there have been a lot of women who have been used as battering rams to push narratives through the government, to push narratives through to voters. And they've used a lot of these same exact women. Now, it's not to say that if they had voted one way or the other, they would have been protected. No, what I'm saying is that was a hunt they should have stayed out of. Some women should have looked at this if they had just looked out for home and started to really take a good idea of what would happen if this person gets in office. What would happen if this person gets in office? If they were able to forecast, they more than likely would have seen that if they had a DEI position, it was probably time for them to pivot. If they were in HR, they more than likely needed to pivot out of the federal government, take their HR background, and go to a straight position that was only dealing with human resources. Why? Because some of these trends that come through do affect all of us. And I believe that thinking like a hive mind has more than likely harmed a lot of people because they got comfortable. Those jobs that have, what is it, like a GS10 step this or GS13 step that. All of those jobs where people really felt confident for years that they were going to get in and be able to retire from needed a pivot. So here is my point, and here is my recommendation to anybody else who may find themselves in those type of situations. You need to pivot, and you need to pivot on paper first. You need to do maybe the same way that jobs do or companies do when they're looking or forecasting where they could be next year. You possibly need to do that. Take a look at where you are today and what could possibly happen. Look at all of the things that are going economically. Look at who's in office right now. Look at what their agenda is. Look at what the trend or the tide is and make a firm decision that you're going to pivot. Because if these women, especially those, and I'm isolating these in the DEI sector, had taken a very strong, long, hard look, they would have found that by pivoting, they would have at least weathered this storm and had a job versus looking at it at that time and saying, well, no, I've been working here for all these years. I'm going to stay. I'm going to stick it out. Sticking it out is exactly what I don't want you to do. Why? Because 300,000 women, Black women specifically, are out of a job because some of them should have pivoted. I hope you understand what I mean. Another thing is how we look at the fact that we're paying $800+ a month for a vehicle. And then don't forget, the insurance has to get their part, right? Back in the day, you didn't have to have insurance, but now, sister girl, you got to have insurance, and that's expensive. So these things are sort of running hand in hand. You add that $867 car note to another $350, insurance note, and you're paying over $1,000 a month to drive a vehicle when all you need to do is go down there and get yourself a piece of car that runs well to weather the storm, or at least you can have that nice car if you fear that may happen in the future, but have that old buddy in the garage. Have the other vehicle in the garage. I'm going to tell you something. I have a colleague that I used to work with years ago, and we still keep in contact. Very brilliant woman. She came to the United States from Puerto Rico. She purchased a car. Now, she was making about roughly maybe $13, $14 an hour. But I saw this woman buy a home and then purchase a brand new car. But the one thing she did not do was she didn't stop saving, and she did not get rid or trade in the existing vehicle she had for that gigantic note. And what happened? She ended up giving the other car to her son, and she's darn near done paying off the other car. Here's my point. If you forecast and you've got one of these jobs right now, you'll be able to take good care of yourself in the future. We're going to take a commercial break, and after that, we're going to wrap things up. Hey everyone, it's me, Felicia, of the Lockhart Perspective and Headlines with a Voice. I want to tell you a little secret. This is what I used to do, because I don't do it anymore. I would go to the store, buy the barbecue sauce, pour it inside of a bowl, put a whole bunch of different spices, a dash of brown sugar, a dash of maple, and a dash of mustard, stir it all around, and everybody would be like, oh my gosh, this is the best, this is the best. But I was exhausted after all of that, and a lot of times I couldn't remember how many dashes of what I put in it. But I don't have to do that anymore, because now I just go to Judge Joe Brown's website and I order his 3-pack of bottled barbecue sauce. It is by far the best, and I do mean the best barbecue sauce I've ever eaten. And when you go to his website and you order his 3-pack, you'll see exactly what I mean. Head on over to jjbbbbq.com and order Judge Joe Brown's barbecue sauce. You'll be glad you did, and you're going to tell me about it. I know you will. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in with us today to find out exactly how these 300,000 Black women that were forced out of the United States workforce affect each and every one of us, because it really does. My name is Felicia Lockhart. I'm going to thank each and every one of you for hanging out with us today. Please remember to take care of yourselves, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And until we see one another again, please take care of my friend, because my friend is you. To receive instant notification each time I upload, please hit the subscribe button and the bell notification. Lockhart Perspective. Helping